So I let me do a good introduction here. We've got TimBallard with us, who's the founder and CEO of Operation Underground Railroad. And I'm going to let him tell you about OUR and what they're doing. But he is a former CIA Homeland Security agent who left his job after 12 years to start privately combating child trafficking on this planet. And to date, his organization's rescued over 400 victims around the world and arrested over 200 traffickers. And they've got an amazing movie that I had the privilege to preview last night, coming out in May, called The Abolitionists. And we're going to give him a chance to tell you all about it. The bottom line is that most of us think slavery ended on the planet with Lincoln, but it's not true. It is alive and well. Human trafficking is the fastest growing criminal enterprise in the world. And Tim is leading the battle to change that. Tim, we're so glad to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
Have we got him loud enough? Can everybody hear him?
Yes, we're getting the signal.
Okay.
We're doing well.
So, yeah, Tim is calling us from Haiti, actually on and off, out working to rescue more children. And so this is a miracle. We've got him here on the line. So, Tim, share with everybody how you started this and why this is so a passionate mission for you.
Well, like you said, I spent 12 years as a special agent in the government doing these crimes, fighting every kind of child exploitation, child trafficking, child sex tourism, which is this horrible thing that people don't realize is happening, where mostly Westerners, a lot of people from the United States, will travel to third world countries to engage in sex with children. And, I had heard the stats even in the government, but didn't really believe the numbers that they're talking in the millions. There's over 2 million children forced into sexual exploitation. If you add the child slave labor and the organ harvesting, you're upwards of above 10 million, and just these astronomical numbers. And it wasn't until I was actually put in the field, particularly when we went overseas, that I saw how real this was and how enormous it was, and how it was being, how children are being sold all over the planet. And that's when I started becoming very frustrated, because most of the kids that we would find, we could do nothing for them, simply because they fell outside the jurisdiction of the United States government. And so we had no mandate, we had no authority to engage in these cases. And year after year of being told no, and receiving the just pleading from the host government for us to stay or to come down and help. So many times what they need to infiltrate these black markets is American faces, American operators who have expertise in undercover operations, who can play the role of the traveling sex tourist. And so finally I decided that I had to at least try to see if we could do this. And so in December of 2013, I left my job and created this nonprofit organization, and off we went. And so far it's working because of the help of people who believe in our mission and believe in our cause and have gotten on board. People like Jerry Mullen, who produced the movie The Abolitionists that you just talked about. These are the things that are allowing us to stay in business, allowing us to grow. We're now in over 18 countries, operating, and it's just been a miraculous growth for me. I never thought we would be able to even hit this after a decade, and here we are in a couple of years already. Been to pretty much every country that I consider a high trafficking nation. We've been in. We need to do so much more. These poor children. Today we visited some of the kids in Haiti that we had rescued back in February of 2014. We had to see them, how they're doing great. They look good, and that's part of our mission is we come back to the places where we've been to make sure the kids are still doing well, make sure they're getting what they need in terms of their healing and recovery.
You know, Tim, it's easy for, I think, a lot of people in this country to think that this is something that happens far away, and it's those people that we don't put a face in a real actual child, and you've brought their faces, they're real people. You've made it so real. You've shed light on just that it's not happening far away. It's happening all around us. Can you share a little more? I mean, this is something happening even in our community, which
that's right, absolutely. And we actually don't get to publicize too much what we're doing domestically, even though about half of our operations these days are domestic. It's estimated that there's over 100,000 children in the United States that are forced into child exploitation, and that number increases every year. The State Department estimates 8,000 to 10,000 children every year are smuggled into the United States and forced into sexual exploitation. So, just as an example, and I can't give details because the operations that we assist on and support in the United States are more sensitive. They require a different approach that we can't talk about always. But just in the last 4 months, we have assisted in the apprehension of around 30 pedophiles who were seeking to engage in sex with children in the United States.
That's here in our own country, right?
Right here in our own country, in various jurisdictions throughout the United States. So it is absolutely here. It is everywhere. And you mentioned, shining a light, showing the faces. That was actually Jerry Mullen's vision when I had a chance encounter meeting with him before I left the government. And he was telling me, of course, he's the Oscar winner of Schindler's List. He produced Schindler's List along with several other big movies through the 90s, especially. And he approached me and said that they were overwhelmed by the response of Schindler's List, the awareness that it produced. And he said the one regret they had was that they couldn't make Schindler's List in 1941, let's say, like while it was happening. Imagine if Schindler's List had come out in 1941, right? When people could have done something about the Holocaust, when they could have rose up and taken a stand and stopped it. And that's exactly what would have happened if somehow that movie magically could have been produced at that time. But the point he was making when he told me this was, he was saying, we have the opportunity to make the Schindler's List for the quote-unquote Holocaust of our day, the kidnapping and the rape and the trafficking of little children. We can actually create this movie while it's happening, while we can still do something about it. And I recognize that this is exactly right. I mean, this problem is so enormous that no one government is going to take care of it. People can't sit back and say, well, the government will do this. I don't need to look at it because they're going to take care of that. I mean, that's not how we got rid of anything evil on this earth. Slavery, the legalized form of slavery in the 19th century, certainly didn't get taken care of because the government rose up and said, we're going to take care of this. It was people like Harry Beecher Stowe, the abolitionists, the Underground Railroad, private people who rose up and yelled so loud that basically it shook the foundation of the government. People have to get involved. They have to know what's happening. And that's when, look at these presidential elections we're having. Have you heard any of them talk about the fact that there's more slaves living today than all the slaves added up over the 350 years of the transatlantic slave trade that we have read about in history books? There's more slaves today, and yet we don't hear any of those candidates talking. None of those pundits are asking those questions. Why? I mean, is there anything more serious on earth than 2 million children being forced into sexual exploitation? And yet they don't even talk about it. And the reason they don't talk about it is because the people aren't demanding it, and the people aren't demanding it because they don't know about it. They don't know what's happening. So I look at someone like Jerry Mullen and his crew, Chet Thomas and Darren Fletcher. I see them as modern day Harry Beecher Stowe's, who are going to reach out to people, show them, shine a light, show the faces of the bad guys, show the kids and the women who are being trafficked, and move people and let them know this is not something we can just keep turning a blind eye to until we all rise up. This is not going anywhere.
Tim, can I ask you something about the movie? And I haven't had the opportunity, as Kim has, to view the movie yet, although it is on my list and has been ever since I knew that it was coming. Give our listeners, if you would, an appreciation of what it is we're talking about here, because this is not Hollywood. My understanding is that that these courageous filmmakers are going right into the trenches with you.
Yeah, these are the heroes. I mean, I feel bad because they're trying to make us look like heroes, me and my team. They truly are the heroes because they don't have the training that my team has, and yet they are willing to go in, like you said, into the trenches. I mean, I've had media folks actually accuse us of falsifying footage on more than one occasion when they see footage from the film because they can't understand how they feel like they're watching a Hollywood production. I mean, technically it's a documentary, but it doesn't feel like a documentary to me when I watch it. It's not like talking heads and telling some story. You're actually in the scene. You're watching my team go undercover. You're getting close-up shots of the traffickers as they negotiate the purchasing of children. And the only reason that they have that kind of footage to show is because they were brave enough to go undercover, put on audio, video, rig our sting locations, and be in the trenches. And then the other amazing thing is that the footage that they were able to get also doubled as evidence that we were able to turn over to the prosecutors in these sting operation cases, and that was a huge blessing because over 80% of child exploitation crimes, especially in developing nations, they fall apart. There's no prosecution because it always required the child to take the stand. And that's always a problem. First of all, it's not good for the child. It's a re-victimization of sorts. But also it gives opportunity to the bad guys to extort, to threaten the families, and so they usually pull the kids out of the case. And of the 400 victims that we've been able to rescue, not one victim has so far had to take the stand. Because we take this footage from the abolitionists and turn it over to the prosecution, and they don't need to put the kids on the stand because they're watching the entire case roll out like a movie from the day we met the traffickers to the day they got arrested and everything in between. So really, these filmmakers truly are heroes who are braver than me because I'm telling you, if I had as little training as they had, I would not go into the places that they went into. But they were willing to do it.
And by training, you're talking about very tactical, almost warfare-like training. You're using some pretty tough guys to go into these situations.
Oh, absolutely. My team, we have former CIA, former Navy SEALs, former military law enforcement, and they go into the darkest corners on the planet. I mean, they're walking into bars and brothels. They're sitting down. We've gone into the homes of traffickers, into their turf, to sit down and negotiate a deal without weapons, with the knowledge that they likely do have weapons and thugs guarding the house and so forth. And we walk in, but we walk in with these cameramen who are pretending to be, our colleagues who are looking for kids as well, because they're that dedicated. We volunteers. They put the camera on me and put the camera on my SEAL. And they'll do that sometimes, but they said, but we're the professionals. We know how to get the right shot, and so they insist on coming in, and we let them because we know how valuable this footage is going to be for the prosecution. And so they like I said, they're extremely brave individuals
and extremely committed to saving these kids. That comes across so strong in the movie that your love for these kids is what's driving you being willing to take those risks. It's just amazing.
Well, why else would you ever do that?
Yeah.
Right? It's got to be.
Yeah, once the very first experience I ever had, it was in the early 2000s, and I had been working my first couple of years. I was mostly doing child exploitation, child pornography cases where we would go after the end users and arrest these guys. But during the course of one of these investigations, we actually came across a child victim from the video. And the first time that happened for me, it was a little boy who was 5 years old who had seen the video that he was being sexually exploited, and we were able to catch his captor, who was an American man who was trafficking this little boy from Mexico back and forth from California and into Mexicali, Mexico. Caught him out near the border and pulled the little boy out. And that was absolutely a transformative experience for me, where this little boy, as the dust was settling in the investigation, ran to me and just jumped into my arms and just crying and shaking. And he said, "I don't belong here. I don't belong here." And holding that little boy with those, and as I was holding him, I remember those horrible images of him were flashing through my mind. And I thought, this is the little boy from the video. I can't believe it. Here he is. This is actually a real child. And then to think that there's 2 million others that are suffering this. It's when you have that kind of an experience where you truly become dedicated, and you recognize that you know too much now. Sometimes you wish you didn't, but you know too much now, and you're going to do this for the rest of your life.
Well, Tim, I want you to know the message is coming through in the movie. Everybody that I've brought to see it has come away saying, honestly, this feels like the most important thing that we could be working on. And it should be. 2 million children being raped. And what does the film say? Is it 32 seconds a child is sold for sex on the planet?
That's correct.
I mean, folks, this needs to be the forefront. We need to make this a priority. And one of my favorite parts in the film, Tim, is the very end when the screen is black and it comes up that something along the lines that everyone can do something.
Yes.
It's so powerful, because we had a great discussion when we had you Skyped in after the premiere last night. That whatever you can do, you have an influence. You can share with the people around you in your world. And I know ever since I became aware of you guys, I try to post something on my social media to my friends every single day to remind them about this. I encourage everyone I know to sign up as an abolitionist, and maybe you can tell them exactly the website that they can go to do that. But I feel like I've got my children safe at home every day. The least I can do, the very least, is to donate every month to your effort to save the kids that aren't safe. And I just, this is a small thing, but it is something that everybody listening to this can do.
And I had a similar thought, Kim. And Tim, as you take your teams into these areas, you're not looking necessarily for people like Dr. Paul and Kim to, get some tactical training and go suit up. But there are other ways people can get involved, especially as they learn more about what's going on through this incredible movie, which is really just a ride along in a lot of ways.
Absolutely. There's so much people can do. And when people ask, what can I do? I said, you know what? You actually know better than I do what you can do. You know your skill set. Again, I go back to Harriet Beecher Stowe. She saw slavery for the first time, not basically on accident. She kind of stumbled upon it, and she knew she could write. So she wrote a book. And our website, which is OURrescue.org. I mean, people can go there and learn about it and donate to our cause, but we're not the only game in town, and we don't pretend to be the solution to this. There's a lot of organizations out there who are combating this. International Justice Mission is one. There's a group that I love called Fight the New Drug. They deal with pornography. It's fightthenewdrug.org. They deal with the effects of pornography, which is the thing that's driving the demand. I mean, why are there 2 million kids being sold for sex? Well, because there's a demand that big that justifies that number. Because there's that many sex addicts, and they're sex addicts because of the increase of pornography. And this organization talks about how porn truly is a drug that can create drive this problem. So there's so many things people can do. There's legislation that's constantly being discussed, but again, no one knows about it. But if we knew about it, we'd get these bills passed quicker. For example, HR 515 was a bill that I testified before Congress about, and it took over a year for this to pass. That's ridiculous. It was a wonderful bill, International Megan's Law, that allowed for governments to coordinate better so they can track child sex offenders better. Why this thing wasn't passed in 2 months is shameful. But it wasn't discussed. No one even knew that it was being discussed or that it was even being considered. And so people can call their congressmen and senators, be informed about what's happening, get these bills passed faster. In a lot of countries, there's very little legislation. So there's so many things people can do outside of Operation Underground Railroad if they just learn about the problem and find what their niche is and just get involved in some way.
I really like the way you just brought that back to individual strengths and what we can do individually. I think all too often we wait around, for somebody to tell us what to do. When the skills that we already have, our own skill set, could be used to contribute in some meaningful way.
And we just got to get motivated to do it. After seeing the movie last night, I posted a quote by Albert Einstein online that said, "The world is a dangerous place, not because of the people who are evil, but because of the people that don't do anything about it." And I have so much respect for you being somebody who decided, I'm going to do something about this and put every ounce of effort I have. And all of us can do something to help. We just need to take what we have and do it.
Thank you so much. And the quote from Einstein reminds me of another quote from Edmund Burke, who's a British statesman, who said that the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. And it's absolutely true.
Right.
So let's talk for a minute about the movie and what people can do to help with the movie launch. Maybe you could talk a little bit about what we have planned on May 16th.
So May 16th, it's obviously the release of the film, and as films work, that first opening weekend needs to be huge, because there's several hundred. I don't know exactly what the number is. Several hundred theaters have already committed, but that needs to be several thousand. The movie needs to do so well that first weekend that other theaters say, well, we're going to move into our theaters as well. And so we really need people in the theaters on May 16th and during that weekend. And we're asking those who can buy out a theater. Companies can buy a theater out, or buy several theaters out, and bring in their clients and their colleagues and so forth. And then that's how this is going to spread. And so we're looking for people to just get on social media, tell people about the release of the film. You can go to rescue2m.com, which obviously stands for 2 million, but it's rescue2m.com. That is the official website for the movie, where people can go and learn more and ask questions of the producers about where the movie is going to be playing and how they can buy a theater out and so forth. So that's what we're hoping happens.
Okay. I've been talking to Mark Stott and your staff because I'm going to be in India on May 16th, and they're arranging for me to take the movie and have a showing with people from all around the world, because that's the one thing I could do.
Awesome.
But wherever you are, whatever you can do, you can make a difference to help. And Tim, I was so thrilled that we were able to have you on the HopeCast, because talk about hope. We have the opportunity here to bring hope to some children in the world that need it more than anyone I can imagine.
Well, thank you. We thank you so much for allowing us to be with you and use this venue to get the word out. So thank you so much, and for all you're doing to support us.
Well, you've seen these children in situations that are probably as hopeless as it gets, and created some other options for them. And what a great model for us to take a look at in our own life. What other options could we create? Because I think some similar principles are involved there. We're talking about this particular cause, which I agree, Kim. I think this is one of the most important things we could be doing right now for these vulnerable children to be assisted in this way. And thank you, Tim, for your good work and the service that you and your team provide along those lines. What else can we learn from this about how to move forward to create value in this world and for good people to step up and do good things? I like the quote that you gave earlier, Tim.
Tim, I'm also wondering, what else can we do in our communities? Because one of the other statistics in the film was about the majority, it sounds like, of child pornography is coming from the United States.
Absolutely. The majority of the demand and also of the production, sadly enough, is right here at home. And a lot of that, we need to. I mean, I've been involved with fighting that crime for so long, and almost every interrogation ends the same way. Is these people who are sex addicts, who are abusing children, or downloading child pornography, eventually they're going to hurt children once they get the chance. I mean, their stories are all so similar. That they became addicted to pornography at a young age, generally, and getting back into my friends over at FightTheNewDrug.org and other organizations that fight pornography. I mean, these guys, their experiences are corroborated by the evidence or by the science behind what we're discovering. They actually become addicted to this. It's a drug. Pornography is a drug, and like any other drug, it's all based on their desire for a chemical reaction in their brain. And that chemical reaction eventually starts to wear off, and they need to get something stronger, something more potent to produce the chemical reaction that they seek. Just like a marijuana user will eventually see that the benefits of that chemical reaction of taking marijuana aren't as great after years of use, so they move on to heroin or something heavier. And that's what happens with porn addiction. It can. I'm not saying it happens in every instance, but enough that it creates this demand for children is that they turn to something more potent, and they turn to child pornography. And then all of a sudden, they didn't even want to be here. They can't believe that they're here, but here they are, now attracted to children, and then they want to engage in sex with children. And so in terms of fighting this at home, we truly are creating the demand here in the United States. And so people need to educate their children about sex addiction, at the appropriate age, and parents can choose what that might be. But I think we need to have more education about what things online like pornography can do to contribute to the demand and to the increase of sex addiction throughout the world. That's how we fight it on the front end, and on the back end, we're saving kids. We're reducing the demand.
I know my husband had commented, there was an article here in the paper at the time of the Super Bowl about the amount of sex trafficking that happens around that event every year. And he was shocked, having never heard that before. I would imagine we're going to have a lot of listeners that aren't familiar. Can you speak to that a little bit, just to educate our listeners?
The Super Bowl has become kind of I think the symbol of where trafficking happens, because we hear about that a lot. But really, it's every event, any big event where a lot of people are there. I mean, we're feeding a demand. There's also a lot of food being sold at the Super Bowl because a lot of people are there that eat food, and that's what this is. There's a demand for sex, for child sex, everywhere, and so anywhere where there's a lot of people, they're going to bring those kids, and they're going to put them in hotel rooms. They're going to go online and advertise that they have minors that are selling for sex. And every time there's a Super Bowl or other major event, and we see this every time there's, like in the Staples Center in Los Angeles, every concert, the same thing's happening. It just doesn't get as much publicity as the Super Bowl. But the demand is there, and the traffickers will feed that demand, and they continue to feed it as it continues to grow.
Wow. How do you stay neck deep in all of this day in and day out and not have it get to you? It starts to feel so discouraging to me that there's this much evil around us. What keeps you going and positive in spite of that?
It's hard. I have an awesome wife and family, and sometimes I just have to go sit in my hot tub for 2 days, and then get back to work. It is hard. We cry all the time. All my team, we'll just break down. But then we get back to work. I think because, like today, before I got on the phone a couple hours ago, I just said goodbye to two of the kids, a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old, who we spent all day at the hotel, and they're in a good place. That's a place of protection. But these kids were being sold. We actually bought. Oh, you saw them. They're the two kids. They're actually the two kids from the movie that you just saw last night. The two little Haitian kids.
Oh, they were the cutest kids. Oh,
and they're just as cute today. I was with them all day today. We went swimming. We had lunch. It's days like today that make me want to. I think what might have happened if we were not there. They would have been sold into organ harvesting. They would have been sold into sex trafficking or slave labor. That's where these kids go. And to think that here they are at this nice hotel with my team, having lunch and swimming and going back to a good home, that's what keeps us going, is that if all that happened was these two kids ended up where they were today, it was all worth it. And so how much more worth it is when we can say that that's happening to 400 or but in 2 years or a couple thousand, even more than that, really. I mean, we talk about that number 400, but it's actually much bigger. If my favorite scene in the movie is when we're in Colombia and that vendor's trying to take us to see hookers. But you remember what he says is, hey, don't even talk about underage girls because you can't buy that here. All those Americans, they got arrested, and did you see the news? And you're crazy to go. You don't be asking for kids. Of course, he didn't realize that he was talking to the guys who actually created that incident, right? We were the Americans that were quote unquote arrested, and he doesn't know that. But what happened there? I mean, it was a very emotional moment for us. After that, we walked away. You can kind of see it in my eyes actually as I'm walking away. Because what we're recognizing is how many kids were rescued that didn't know that they needed to be rescued. They didn't know they were going to be trafficked because they never will be, because their trafficker is in jail. The tourists that would have come down and bought that child for sex didn't show up because they were scared to show up because they saw the news report as well. And that's what this movie's going to do. It's going to make people think twice. I'm not going to travel. I'm not going to do this anymore. So we want to rescue kids who never even knew, who will never know that they needed to be rescued. And so that's what we can do with this movie and with the awareness piece, is create a deterrent so powerful that it's just too risky and the travelers won't come and the traffickers won't traffic.
Yeah, I have to admit, that was the point in the movie that I got hope in a bigger way, that what you did, that one operation in Colombia, one operation is deterring. People are thinking twice about trafficking kids because of that one thing. That's the moment hope came back in, that we can do this.
It's drawing a line in the sand. It says we don't play this game the way that you've been playing it.
The rules have changed.
The rules have changed.
We're not allowing it.
There's a new sheriff in town.
And it's TimBallard.
It's TimBallard.
Wow.
Oh, yes.
I could talk about this for hours. And actually, all my friends and family are getting irritated, I think, because every time I talk to them, have you signed up? Are you an abolitionist yet? Because you better be, or you're going to keep getting hassled by me forever.
Thank you.
Well, and if people sign up, you guys have, I noticed today that I'm on the text updates, so that when rescues happen, I get that text message knowing that those donations every month are actually paying to help you, and that it's working, and that these rescues are going on. And I love a cause that I can be involved and see the difference that it's making. And I think people will get excited and feel like they're participating, even though they can't be down there, like Paul said, in our
It is. It's a unique charity in that way, where there's tangible results, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because we do make efforts to notify our supporters as soon as we can after a rescue happens. I will say though, you're only seeing about half of the actual operations. Most of the operations we're doing these days, we cannot even publicize in any way, shape, or form because of the sensitivities around them. But the ones that we can, we definitely get out to people. See, this is real. This is actually working. You are saving kids.
There's nothing more important, folks, if we're going to bring hope to the world, that we end human trafficking. It's just not okay that we have any human beings on the planet being treated that way. We got to stop it.
I'm also thinking back to what you were saying earlier, Tim, about some of the roots, and it gets down to the appetites, and you might not think, for example, that consumption of pornography would result in a child losing his life or being traded for sex. But it gets back to some basic roots. And I think as we all take a look at our own life and do a little inventory, where am I with that? Am I consuming or promoting anything that could potentially exploit another human being? That's another root level cause. I think that we can all address. Do you have anything you'd like to say about that?
Yeah, I would add that we've talked about pornography and sex addiction. We also work, especially here in Haiti where we are. We're working various cases right now on slave labor. It's a major problem here, where children are taken and forced into slavery. And in some ways, it's almost culturally accepted. They even have a name for it called Restavik, where these kids, they are slaves. It's what's interesting is we're investigating where these kids are taken. They're taken over the border into the Dominican Republic and other places, other countries, other island countries around here, where they work in sugar plantations and avocado fields and so forth. And these avocados are being purchased, by up the supply chain to arrive on our kitchen table. And again, it's not something we can blame anyone for. We just go to the supermarket. We don't think twice about the fact that, is it possible that this avocado that I'm taking home to my family once, has the fingerprints of a child slave who picked it? And these are things we need to start becoming more aware of. And there's efforts being made now to identify which growers are using slave labor. And that's chocolate out of Africa is a huge one. And where we know that we can identify the supply chain, and a lot of companies, food companies, are actually becoming more responsible in this way and opening up social responsibility components to their businesses, and I applaud that. But there needs to be more awareness around that as well.
Are there brands or companies that could we make any difference by boycotting any specific things that would that make a difference?
I think it could. Most of the major companies are trying to be careful, because they're buying it from other people that they don't know who. They're buying it from local farms. They're not, and they don't ever see the kids there. So they're actually doing work to investigate. So it could be detrimental to start protesting right away, especially as a lot of these companies are actually making efforts to investigate where their product is beginning. So I don't think it's such a great idea to probably protest as much as it is to talk to them and say, hey, what are you doing? Follow up with them. How can we help you find where you're getting your product? But it's a newer thing really that needs to come to light as well. We're working on that. Our focus has been on child sex trafficking, but we can't ignore when we see this happening as well. And so it's kind of it's something we're just getting into, and determining what's the best way to approach it, but we're seeing it on the actual labor side. I mean, that's what we're discovering, and we're working backwards from there, or forwards, I guess, up the supply chain to find out where it's going. So yeah, well, you'll be hearing more from us on that in the future. But just another thing to just think about and consider.
Well, it raises questions that we may not have thought to ask. And I think as we continue to ask those questions, and this is what I'm getting from that, Tim, there's, you suddenly notice, oh, avocados are really cheap now. Maybe we can ask a question or two. And it's not that it's all, I'm not an advocate of running around paranoid. What does that help, right? But asking appropriate questions and being willing to expend the resources to do it. Those companies that you mentioned who are actually using some of their resources to investigate the source of the products that they purchase to resell.
Exactly.
That's something that we could get behind, and we could support the companies who are willing to do that sort of a thing. And then as information becomes more available to us, we can make further decisions.
Wow. Tim, the other thing, I got on Amazon the other day and ordered the book that you'd written about Abraham Lincoln. And I'm dying for it to come because I want to read more. Abraham Lincoln's always been kind of close to my heart. As a small child, I had this experience. I kept running for school election and I always lost. And I lost so many elections, my dad started calling me Abraham Lincoln. So I became interested in, okay, I'm going to have a win sometime in life if I stick it out. But maybe I would love to hear you speak a little bit because we have a few more minutes with you about your love and study of such a great man in the history of our country.
Yeah, I never intended to write that book or the books I've written as much. To me, I think it was therapy. I started getting into that whole area of study as I entered the world of child trafficking and investigating these crimes, and I found a lot of comfort, almost therapeutic for me to read about people who were my heroes who did very difficult things, fighting against seemingly insurmountable obstacles, and so I find a lot of comfort in reading about Abraham Lincoln. And I mean, his entire life was one enormous struggle. His presidency was just basically his life in a microcosm. I mean, it was dark. It was rough. It was probably the most difficult presidency anyone ever had. I mean, imagine half the country just left and over this issue of slavery and how he's grappling with it. He doesn't know what to do. He doesn't want to make the war about slavery, but then he recognizes that it has to be about that, and this is his chance to free the slaves. And he has a huge conversion. And I think that's what I love about the story is it's almost a personal redemption in a lot of ways of him, where he comes to discover, just like all of us need to discover, that this is really bad what's happening, and we've turned a blind eye to this for far too long. And he sees this tiny window open up where he might be able to use this conflict as an opportunity to free all the slaves and end this. And he goes for it. And he's criticized and he's killed in the end for doing it. But he did it anyway. He took that window and he stretched it, and he opened it wider, and he started yelling through it, and people got on board. And this is the same solution we need. We need people like him who are willing to find the little windows in our lives that will allow us to get involved with this most heinous crime that's happening, which frankly is very similar to the crime and the plague that Lincoln was dealing with of human bondage. I mean, it's the same problem. It's reared its ugly head in a different way, but it's certainly the same thing. And so I find a lot of inspiration in him, and I think everyone could. Go for it. You might even die, but go for it, because there's nothing more important in your existence than to go for it.
And make such a difference on the planet that you lived here.
Yes.
He is such an inspiration because he had it so rough. We've talked all day for the last 12 hours to people who've had these really rough
Hard
journeys
things.
and overcome. And he had to overcome more than most. Didn't we think he suffered from some depression?
Yeah, there's a lot of evidence
that he might have.
That he I think he certainly did have to have depression, and all the tough things in his life didn't help. but he just overcame. He just kept moving forward and wouldn't stop.
Tim, you've created an online course about some of the things that you've learned about men like Abraham Lincoln.
Yes.
I didn't know if you were going to mention that or not, but could you tell us a little bit about that and how it's available?
It's the course. Do you have Daniela there?
Yeah, maybe we better get Danielle over here.
In fact, we've been giving shout outs to Navanas, spelled like bananas, only with an N and a V. And Daniela has the details. There's a course there that you've helped to create, or I'm looking at Abraham Lincoln over here.
Go ahead. Let's let Daniela talk about it.
Tim's been a very sought-after speaker at a lot of schools and youth and adult activities about his knowledge of American history. And because he was off on his other adventures and couldn't always fulfill all of those requests, he came in and has recorded all of his lectures, and we've turned that into an online course that's available on navanas.com.
Oh, there you go. Navanas, spelled like bananas, only with an N and a V.
N and a V, yeah.
Navanas. We're developing a new PR campaign for Navanas, and just kind of trying it out here at the World HopeCast.
I like it.
So, Tim, what would be your last message to everyone listening? Because we've not only got listeners all over the world hearing you today, but this recording is going to be available forever for people to hear. And I want to just
forever. So make it good.
My last message would be to get involved, be part of the solution, and where it begins, the very first thing you need to do before you ask, what can I do to solve the problem, you need to educate yourself about what's happening. And I've found that once you do that, you'll be inspired as to what you can do next. And I think the best way anyone can educate themselves right now is go watch the movie on May 16th. And as you're sitting there watching the movie, ask yourself, what can I do when I walk out of this theater? And I don't know the answer, but it'll come to that to the people who watch and ask that question.
It's so powerful at the end of the movie when that comes up. It's definitely motivating for all of us to follow your example and do something to help, because there is something in all of our power. We just got to commit to it and take action.
That's right. Thank you, Tim, for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I so appreciate it.
Would you also please convey our gratitude to your team as you return? We realize that you're on
an op right now.
You're doing your thing.
That's right.
Please convey our gratitude also to your team for their courageous efforts.
Shortly, and I'll pass on the message. Thank you so much.
Yes, and thank you for your service.
We pray for you all that you're successful and safe.
Thank you so much.